Okay, who is at their first lunch and learn? Oh, that's a lot. That makes me so excited. This is one of our very favorite things we do every month. We do it every month, but I'm going to tell you guys what next month is here in a minute. So if this is your first one, come see us again. They're always a really fun time. Our Lunch and Learns are sponsored by Courtyard by Marriott here in Cartersville. We love our partners, and they help make this a reality and make this something we get to put on every month. If you are a TELUS fan, we've got some good things coming up for you here in the next couple weeks. Our PJ party is this Saturday. Who is ready to come see Santa? Oh, I know. Yeah, it's exciting. Santa and the Grinch and Frosty and do a bunch of activities and get milk and cookies, right? It's a big day. We are excited because we're going to have a sensory hour at the beginning of this week's PJ party on Saturday. So if you need a quieter experience with Santa or the Grinch or Frosty, then you can come in that first hour. But if you are interested in that, there is a link on our website where you can sign up and tell us you're coming so that we can be prepared for that. So just check that out. It is our last evening Skywatch of the year next Friday night. It starts at 6 p.m. You get to look through our telescope, weather permitting, right? That's always the fun part of that. But spaces are really filling up on that. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure you're checking on that as soon as possible. And like I said, if you are a big fan of our Lunch and Learns, if this is your first one, make sure you come back and see us again next month. Next month, our speakers on the 21st are going to be Kennesaw State University's aerial robotics competition team. Yeah, it's really cool. They're going to bring their robot. Our Stay and Explore activities are going to be really awesome. I mean, they're always really awesome, but we got some really cool stuff coming next month. So definitely check that out. But I think you guys came to talk about video games today. Is that right? Oh, make sure you're joining. And I think, is the QR code going to stay up as it goes, or does it stop once you hit start? Okay, yeah, so go ahead and pull out your device, get logged into the game so that you can play today. Our speaker is Rebecca Melsheimer. Rebecca is our curatorial curator here at TELUS. You guys, she has been at TELUS for 13 years. I know. If you are younger than 13 years old, don't tell us. It makes us feel old, right? That makes it hard. And it's going to be a really good time. So Rebecca, take it away.
All right, there we go. All right, so it looks like most everybody's already kind of figured out how to do this, but I'll give it just a few more minutes for people to get logged in here. So you can use the QR code, just scan it with your phone and you can log in. Or if for whatever reason that's not working for you, you can do kahoot.it and then enter that game pin in. So just a little bit. Yeah, because once I start, this is going to go away. Volume. Where's Elise? All right, so is everybody actually logged on that wants to play the game? Are we all good? We're ready to get started? All right, so I'm going to start off with a couple of questions that don't count on our quiz. Because this is a little bit different than we've done our Lunch and Learns in the past. It's going to be an interactive quiz game, because I thought when they said, hey, do a Lunch and Learn for gaming, what better way to do it than to have a game, right? All right, so our very first question, remember this doesn't count toward your score, but I would like you to answer so that you can kind of get used to it. All right, so our very first question, I like playing video games. I hope that's an easy question for everybody. So when you've chosen what you want, you need to hit submit so that it actually comes in and shows up that you've answered. You got 3 more seconds. All right, we got 61 answers submitted, so let's see. What are we getting here? Okay, that's great. So I got an easy audience today, huh? You already like games. And for those people who are in the 2, hopefully you'll learn something today that makes it a little bit more fun for you. No cheat codes, though. We're not doing that today. All right, another question to warm up a little bit. What was the first video game console that you ever played? Got 8 seconds left. All right, so it looks like most everybody's first system that they played was a Nintendo, but we have some older people in the audience also who have played Atari. Yes. I personally started out playing on a computer because my parents didn't believe in video games. So anyway. All right, so now we're going to get started with our actual real questions. Don't call out the answers because you don't want anybody else to get your answer if you worked hard to know it, right? Okay, so our very first one. What was the first video game that was made purely for entertainment? All right, we got 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, it is actually Tennis for Two, and it is kind of a trick question. I know. So Tennis for Two was actually made in 1958, and this is the exciting gameplay that you could look forward to in 1958. It was created by William Higginbotham for the annual open house for the Brookhaven National Laboratory in New York. So they had open house, everybody would come in, and looking at computers is kind of boring. So he thought, why don't we do something that's a little bit more fun for all the people who are coming in to visit? And so he made it in about a week or so, and then he had to create the controllers and everything like that because nothing like that had ever been done before. So you would turn the dial to change your angle, and then you would hit a button to actually hit it back. It was really, really popular with all the visitors, especially the teenagers. There was a line kind of out the door trying to play with it, and they had to kick people off because they enjoyed it so much. So they brought it back the next year, and he added a layer of difficulty onto it because it was a ballistics computer that he was building this on, so he was able to change the gravity. So you could pretend like you were playing tennis on Jupiter if you wanted to. After that, it kind of faded into obscurity. Nobody ever really played it and didn't go anywhere from there. But it was the start of a new era with gaming. So we come to our next quiz question. What was the first viral video game? Got Space Wars, Space Invaders, Pong, Pac-Man. Three, two, one. Oh. Yeah, I'm giving you the hard questions first. All right, so it's Space War. And I did actually have viral in quotes here because it viral in a sense. So it was 1962's Space War. It was developed by the Tech Model Railroad Club at MIT. They got permission to use their new PDP-1 computer if they made something that could demonstrate everything that the computer was capable of doing and use as many of the computer's resources as possible. So it's not a very complicated game in that you only have two spaceships, the wedge and needle, and you're shooting back and forth at each other. And the real game changer here is that the center is a sun, and you have to get around the gravity well. So it was a huge hit at all of the engineering departments across colleges because they were the only ones that actually had these computers. So it was viral in the sense that it went from place to place, but your average person wouldn't have played it. And why would your average person not have played it? Is because that the PDP-1 cost, in today's money, $1 million. So we actually have a PDP-5 that's over in our tech gallery over there, and it was at a much lower price of only $265,000. So needless to say, a lot of places didn't have computers and it wasn't available, but a lot of the founders of the gaming industry got their start in these engineering departments, and so they knew that this was a possibility and thought, maybe we can do it and bring it to everybody else. All right, the Magnavox Odyssey, the first home video game console, was released in Did anybody actually play a Magnavox Odyssey? Got one? Two, one. Let's see. Oh, yeah, 1972. So Ralph Baer is the one who came up with the idea. He worked with TVs and thought, maybe we can make the TV do something else besides just watching shows on it. And he thought, you know what would be really good? Let's make a game so that people could play at home. He knew when he was working on it, he couldn't rely on a computer or one of the large computers, because who's got $1 million in space for a computer that's the size of a room in their house, right? So he did several different prototypes starting in 1967, and he developed this first multiplayer, multi-program video game system. He nicknamed it the Brown Box. He actually put the very stylish 1970s wood veneer on it because he thought it made it look more expensive. So it was a very, very limited gameplay on this. He licensed it, ended up licensing it to Magnavox, and you really only had like 2 little dots and a line is all you had on when you were playing this game. And to kind of give you the idea that you had something else going on and you knew which game you were playing, you took those clings and actually just stuck it to your TV. So you did not have anything complicated in terms of graphics that's going on with this. The problem with this system was that, unfortunately, people thought that they actually had to have a Magnavox TV to be able to play this, because they only sold them at the Magnavox dealerships. And Magnavox didn't do a good job of telling people that they didn't need to have a Magnavox, because they actually really wanted to sell the TVs and not this gaming system. Because they didn't really know what they had at that point. They didn't think anybody was even going to want it. So they added all this other stuff in there, like cards and dice and poker chips and all that kind of stuff like that, so that you could at least feel like you were getting some kind of game. So it didn't do very well, but it did influence later developers. So you basically were playing games at home first, computer games at home first. But it influenced the later developers. So the next step moves out of the home. Atari started out making arcade games, not home video games. True or false? Three, two, one. Yay! Finally an easy question. So yeah, as a matter of fact, Atari started off making arcade games. So Nolan Bushnell, who's one of the founders of Atari, actually played the Space War game when he was in graduate school for engineering. And he also, because he needed to make money over the summers to pay for his school, he worked at an amusement park that had an arcade with the pinballs and everything like that, and he was having to maintain it. He was doing the maintenance on it. So he thought, why don't I put 2 and 2 together? Why can't we just have some computer games at an arcade? So he created a game first, and it didn't actually do very well because it was really, 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 really hard to play. And why would you, if you were an arcade, would you want your game to be really hard to play? More money? Yeah. If you want it to be hard, so people keep having to put quarters in so that you can make money that way. But then he was like, well, I'm not making a whole lot of money with this because it's too hard. So then he saw the Odyssey. He actually went and saw a demonstration with the Odyssey, and they had a game that was kind of like table tennis. So we're going back to the idea of the tennis, like the original tennis for 2. And he thought, that's it. That's going to work. So he made Pong, and they called it Pong because of the sound it made when it hit. So the very first one, arcade game, was installed in Andy Capp's Tavern in Sunnyvale, California in 1972. So that was their kind of their test option. And they got a phone call pretty quickly after they installed it, and the owner was like, well, you got to come get this machine. It's not working. I don't even, this is dumb. I don't want it in here. And they're like, nope, sir, we're going to come over, we're going to look at it, and we're going to check it out. Come to find out, it was so popular that the coin holder had overflowed and jammed the machine. So quite the opposite of being something that didn't work. And so Atari is like, yes, we've got a hit on our hands. Let's go. So it was the first commercially successful video game. And it was actually a two-player game so that you had somebody that you could compete against. So it kind of made it a social activity. Okay, and this started the golden age of arcades, opening the market to video games because people were now, oh, yeah, this is something cool. Maybe we want to play it. So our next question. Today's alien monster emojis are based on what arcade game? So we got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Yes, it is in fact Space Invaders. So Space Invaders was the first global gaming hit. Prior to that, any sort of arcade games were sort of in your own particular region. So the US had their own and Japan had their own. So it was first released in Japan in 1978. It was so popular that they actually had Space Invaders only arcades, so that was the only game that you could play when you went in. There is sort of a urban legend. I would say it's an urban legend because I haven't been able to verify this, but there was supposedly a yen shortage, so the coin shortage, after the introduction of this game because everybody was playing the arcade so much. It actually had a lot of firsts to it for video games. It was the first use of the life system, a high score system that carried across so that you could compete against other people, other players. It was the first that had an enemy that actually shoots back at you. And it was also the first to have a difficulty curve. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah, difficult, yeah. So that's a really classic thing for game design, right? You build up, it gets harder and harder, and at your boss level, and then you go to your next one, and it keeps going up, and it keeps getting harder. So this is actually the first game that had this, but it was on accident. They did not do that on purpose. The machines really struggled to render all of the different aliens. So you had like, I don't know, what is that, like 20, 30, 40, whatever. And as you were hitting them and you killed them, it could render faster, so they started moving more quickly. And so that was how this difficulty curve originated, even though he didn't actually mean for it to happen. So then, because this was so successful in Japan, over in the United States, everybody starts thinking, well, maybe there is a market for the home video games. Now everybody's been able to play. So our next question. Magnavox made more money from lawsuits than it did on Odyssey sales. True or false? At 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yes, as a matter of fact, it is true that Magnavox made more money from lawsuits. So after Atari had such great success with the Pong in the arcade, they thought, hey, let's make one for the home. And they named it, very creatively, Home Pong. And it did really well. And all these other kind of like toy manufacturers were thinking, well, it seems like it might be pretty easy to do. Let's start releasing. So everybody started releasing versions of it. Coleco, Philips, Nintendo, everybody had a version. And Magnavox was like, wait, didn't we already do this? Didn't we make one of these? And in fact, they did. So this is, if it'll load here, Coleco's version, as they're playing on the Telstar. You only had a couple of options of games that you could play, and they were all pretty much variations of Pong, even though they called it, you know, the hockey game and everything like that. And Magnavox was like, this looks exactly like what we were doing with our system. And they sued Atari. Atari settled because they knew they were on the wrong end of that, because Nolan Bushnell, one of the founders of Atari, had actually signed in as a person to come in to see the demonstration of the Magnavox Odyssey, so he really did not have any justification for saying that he didn't know. And everybody else was pretty much like, okay, well, they win, we'll just go ahead and pay the money. They were making enough money that they just, yeah, we'll pay millions of dollars. So Magnavox actually made about 2 to 3 times more in lawsuits, mainly for just settlements of lawsuits, than they ever did from actually sales of the system. So one of the problems with any of these systems is, what's one of the great things about systems today? Anybody got? It's portable. You can also, yeah? Yeah, so you can play a lot of different games on one system, right? You got like all of this crossover and everything. One of the problems with these very early systems is that you were stuck. You were going to be playing Pong, and you were going to play Pong. That's all you had. You couldn't switch anything out. You could change the thing and go over to the 2-player Pong versus the 1-player Pong, and that was pretty much all that you could do. So that is something that they really needed to actually figure out, because after a while you get tired of playing the same game all the time, right? Yeah. Okay, so the first video game console to use cartridges was the Got 5 more seconds for our answers. Oh, that was a hard one. That was a hard one. Okay, so it's the Fairfield Channel F, which I had never heard of. It was actually released before the Atari 2600. So it was a game changer. No? Okay. Because you can switch out your cartridges, and it was the first one to do that. And it was released in 1976. So Jerry Lawson, who was the gentleman that was over on the previous slide, he was actually put in charge of the project to figure out how to make it work, to develop the cartridge system. And it was, and this is a sign of the age, it was modeled on 8-track tapes. So that's why they look like they do. They were also the first to use a microprocessor actually in the system. So it had really good graphics and everything like that for the time. The unfortunate thing is they didn't release it in such a way with a lot of advertising or anything like that. They also didn't have a well-known name. I mean, I say Fairchild Channel F's not very catchy. But it is. They did name it Channel F for fun. The idea with this was that they were going to actually make more money by selling the cartridges than they would actually from the console, because it was really expensive to make. And that is also something else that a lot of the gaming companies still do. They plan on making more money off of that. So this opened up the market to third-party developers, because they could just make a cartridge. They didn't have to make their own console. Okay, so the biggest hit by Activision, the first third-party manufacturer of video games, was there's a hint on the screen. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it is Pitfall. They ended up selling over 1 million copies of it, which is a lot when you think back in 1982. So having the cartridges meant that you weren't limited to hardware. So the designers at Atari, there was 4 different designers at Atari that left to found Activision. And they left because Atari leadership said, you know what, yeah, you're designing these games, but that's no more important than the person who's actually putting together all the stuff on the assembly line. Wouldn't even let them put their names on the games at all, much less give them a raise in recognition for all of their hard work. So they left, made their own in 1979, started releasing. I have disappeared. I'm back. Started making games, and Atari was like, wait a minute, wait. You can't do that. You're using our system. Unfortunately for Atari, they didn't actually patent any of the things in there, so there was no limitations. So all of the third-party developers could come in and start making games. And that was actually a problem, because now everybody could make games, and not everybody made good games. And a lot of people were making copies of other games. So we had 15 million different versions of Pong, we had a lot of other versions of everything else. So it actually led to a really big problem, and especially for Atari. So, which Atari games were associated with the great video game crash of 1983? So this one you can actually answer multiple. Three, two, one. Oh, this is kind of across the board. So it's E.T. and Pac-Man. So Pac-Man was kind of the signal of what was going wrong with the gaming industry. So they really wanted to make sure, they were like, we got to get this out before Christmas, and they rushed the development for it. And so this is what, if you played Pac-Man in the arcade, this is what you saw. This is what you thought you were going to get when you bought your Atari Pac-Man. This looks pretty good, right? And that's what you actually got. So I'm not even sure how you're supposed to stay out of the way of the ghosts, since they're kind of going all over the place. So it's really kind of buggy. And even in spite of that, they did end up, this was the major selling game for Atari. And that was partly due to the fact that nobody knew it was going to be bad. The reviews and everything like that, we've got internet review sites, and you've got magazines, and you have all these other places that you go check to see, is this a good game? People are like, well, Atari made it, it's got to be good. They bought it. It was not good. So then, we have E.T., which has gone down in history as being the worst video game ever. I wouldn't say that. I think it's just really hard to play. But you got to give credit where credit is due, because the guy who developed it, he did it all by himself. It was just one guy, and they gave him 5 weeks. 5 weeks. So they actually made more cartridges of this than they actually had consoles, because they thought this was going to be selling all these extra consoles. Atari was about 2/3 of the market in the gaming industry in the United States, and in 1982, they had a wonderful profit of $1.7 billion. Any guess at what they made in 1983? Nothing. Yeah, they actually lost $536 million. So that is in 1 year. They were also being outcompeted by home computers. This is when you started being able to have a computer in your house. They had finally become cheap enough and small enough that you could have it at home. So the Commodore 64, the Apple II, all of those in that kind of generation. Atari did end up later making computers, so you could have gotten an Atari computer also. And one of these things is, if anybody has heard about the urban legend, the burial of all of the games and everything in Alamogordo, New Mexico. So that is actually true. It wasn't millions of cartridges of E.T., it was a whole bunch of different cartridges of things and leftover materials, because they couldn't sell them. And what else are you going to do with it? They didn't want to pay for all of the stuff to sit in the warehouse, because they were already losing $536 million. They didn't want to lose any more. So it looked like the video game industry was dead, but was it? All right, put these consoles in order from oldest to newest. Got a little bit more time with this one. I have a feeling you're all going to do really well on this one since most people played Nintendo. You got 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So the first one is the what? NES. And who can tell me when it was released? 1985. Yep. The second one is what? Game Boy. It was released in 89. Great. The third one? 64. It was released in 1996. And the last? And it was released in 2001 in the US. Yeah. So why am I talking about Nintendo at this point? Nintendo actually revitalized the American video game industry. So, like, when I say it was cratered in the United States, it was cratered. None of the toy stores, anything like that, they didn't want to have anything to do with video games. They lost a ton of money. They didn't like it, and they didn't want to try it again. Nintendo decided, hey, this would be a great time to enter the US market. But to be able to do that, they actually had to rebuild trust in video games, period. So they started off releasing arcade games. They were already making arcade games in Japan, and they thought this would be a good thing to port over into the US. And they made sure that their arcade games were equivalent to what you would get when you bought their system. So what you saw, like if you played Duck Hunter in the arcade, you were going to be playing Duck Hunter the same at home. Plus, it was a way to get people back into playing games. It's a lot easier to, drop 5 cents, 10 cents to play a game at an arcade than, dropping $200 to buy a whole system if you don't even know if it's any good yet, right? So they named it the Nintendo Entertainment System because they didn't want to have anybody thinking about the fact that they were video games. They thought that was a way to separate themselves from that. And one of the problems that I had mentioned before with Atari was that there was all these games, they weren't any good. You didn't know what you were going to get. So I know that Nintendo gets a lot of flack for this, for being very restrictive in their licensing and everything like that, but that's what we needed at the time. So they developed a cartridge that had a lockout chip so that nobody else could design anything for their system. They had to review it, and if it didn't make the cut, it didn't make the cut. They restricted anybody who said they wanted to make games for their system. They could only make 5 games a year, because they wanted you to take the time and make a good game, not a lot of games, which got a lot of the developers a little upset about that, and probably still a little bit. They also offered a money-back guarantee to the different toy stores. So traditionally, the store buys the product at a wholesale price and then hopes that they can sell it and make some money off of it. Nintendo said, you know what, I know you're gun-shy, you don't want to actually have to do this. If you don't sell it, we're going to take it back and we're going to give you your money back. So the stores were like, okay, we'll give it a go. So they did all the hard work, and it paid off because we still play Nintendo. So which game series was a spin-off from Donkey Kong? Don't tell people the answer. Yay. Yes, and everybody is correct. So as I was saying, that Nintendo released arcade games, and Donkey Kong was one of their arcade games. It was released in 1981. Nintendo of America was not doing well. Like I said, they were trying to break into a market that didn't exist, essentially. And they were about ready to shut the doors for Nintendo America and just be like, yeah, we're out. But Donkey Kong saved them. This was such a huge hit. It established Nintendo as a prominent brand and began building their reputation as a good game maker. It was also different than some of the other games at the time because it focused on jumping as a mechanic. So a lot of the other ones were just shooting games and that you just going around in circles, essentially, like, Pac-Man. So now, Mario is a bigger franchise than Donkey Kong. And can anybody, this is just a kind of a, see if you know. What was Mario originally called? Jumpman. Jumpman, that's right. Do you know where the name Mario came from? So Nintendo in Japan was sending these systems over to the US, and they told Nintendo of America, you can pick whatever name you want. You don't have to use the name that we're using. And so they said, the guy who we're renting warehouse space from, his name's Mario. Let's use that. So Nintendo has remained influential and has been in other ways that they kind of didn't intend. So true or false? Sony entered the gaming market because of Nintendo. So Sony is PlayStation. Five, four, three. Yes, it is true. So when CDs were developed, it gave gaming developers and the console makers, they had the option of making these really great games because they had a lot more space for saving data and create more detailed and graphics intense games. And Nintendo didn't want to redesign their whole entire system, so they thought, well, let's reach out to somebody and see if they can make an add-on that we can put onto the NES. And they reached out to Sony, who up to this point only made components for a whole bunch of different game companies. And they developed a PlayStation, and they presented it at the 1991 Consumer Electronics Show. Very proud. We have made this, and we were working with Nintendo, and it's going to go on the NES system. And then Nintendo announced the next day, and they said, no, actually, we're going to do a partnership with Philips, and had never let Sony know that that was the case. And being both Japanese companies, they were Sony was very offended because that's just not the right thing to do, right? It's dishonorable. And so what they decided to do was to develop the PlayStation as a standalone console. And to really stick it to Nintendo, they said, hey, we're going to make it 3D, not 2D. And so that made PlayStation the one to beat. Which computer software company entered the console market after the introduction of PlayStation 2? Three, two, one. Yes, it is Microsoft. So when the PlayStation 2 was announced, it was marketed as being a home entertainment system. It could play music CDs, it could play DVDs, you could play games on it. So Bill Gates was worried that this might affect sales of home computers. And remember when computers hurt the gaming consoles, and then now the gaming consoles are going to hurt the computers? I think it's a little bit of fair play there. And also in a change for Microsoft, the reason why they entered the market is because they didn't want PlayStation to have a monopoly. Yeah, I know, like Microsoft is they were really getting in trouble about this time also for being a monopoly, lawsuits and that sort of thing like that. And they thought, hey, we can do this. This is good. It's going to look good that we're trying to increase competition. It's also the first system that was offered by an American company since Atari stopped sales. So it's coming back to the US. So the biggest accomplishment of the system was actually the Xbox Live system. So you could play online games. It had the broadband connection, so you could play higher quality games. You didn't have the same lag that you would have if you were using dial-up. And it created a single connected environment where you had your same username, and then you went from place to place. It kept all your scores, and you can compare yourself to everybody else. And so that kind of brought that to the forefront. And I will say here, do we have any Sega fans here? Yeah. So if you'll know, you probably know, is the Dreamcast actually had all of this first, right? It had an internal modem, so it didn't have a broadband connector. They did add that later, but it was definitely ahead of the curve of what people were looking for at that time, so it just didn't really do very well. And it was kind of hobbled by, the PlayStation. PlayStation was definitely the dominant one in the market. But computers weren't done yet. So Minecraft's visuals were inspired by which game? Three, two, one. So the visuals are inspired by Infiniminer. So on the right-hand side, you have Infiniminer. On the left-hand side, you've got Minecraft. So I think we can all see the similarities there. Yeah. So Infiniminer was released in early 2009. It was a multiplayer game. You had collective goals that you had to work together to reach as you were a miner. It wasn't long before people realized they could actually create their own environments in the system. And unfortunately for the guy who created it, it was open source, so he didn't actually get any revenue from it. So he's like, I'm not going to continue developing it. And so then the developer of Minecraft came across this game and thought, this is a good start. Let's build on that. So Minecraft started off as a computer game that has now been ported to, just about any system that you can think of that you could play. It would also introduce the idea of early access to an incomplete game. So you could play Minecraft in 2009, even before there was a full release. The full release didn't come out until 2011. They also continually update, which is something else that was kind of new to the gaming industry, that you would just get continual updates, and you were not stuck with the original. At a time when all the graphics were getting more and more and more and more complicated and detailed, and gameplay was getting more difficult, Minecraft showed you didn't actually have to do that to be really successful. One of the things that's great about it, it gives you the chance to be creative and to create your own spaces, and people were really looking for that. And it's definitely paid off. They have sold over 350 million copies of the game as of 2025, and upwards of 140 million people are monthly subscribers, so they're actively playing the game. So 140 million people in any given month are playing Minecraft. But we've got computers, we've got video consoles, and then we've got somebody else who's moving into the system. They got new competition. First popular cell phone game, Snake, was released by which phone company? Three, two, one. Yes, Nokia. That was in 1997. And it basically introduced the idea you could have your phone for more than just making phone calls. They put this game on. It's very simple to play. You just use the 2, 4, and the 6 buttons to move your snake. This is not what it looked like on a Nokia. This is a more recent port. But your snake, you basically just move them around, and it ate things, and you don't hit the wall, and you don't hit your tail. That's the extent of the game. Over 350 million people have played Snake on the Nokia, and this kind of brought into the idea of we can put more stuff onto our phones besides just making phone calls. And with smartphones, the mobile gaming market has just exploded. It's reduced demand for your dedicated handheld devices. Why have 2 devices when you've got one that you can just make phone calls, do everything else that you need to do on it? The mobile gaming has influenced the traditional gaming industry by introducing kind of the idea of free-to-play games that you then just pay money to buy certain things, power-ups, different skins, different, weapons, and all that other kind of stuff like that. So that appeared first in mobile gaming, and then now it's moved over into the traditional gaming because, much like anything else, they want to make more money if they can. And that's an easy way to do that. So Here's our last question here. So which classic video game is still part of esports? Three, two, one. Yeah, Tetris. Okay, so Tetris was originally a computer game. Nintendo purchased the rights, and they released it on the NES. It became a big hit for them. And then it also was on the Game Boy, where it did really well. I personally had a Game Boy, and the only thing I played on it was Tetris. So for the classic Tetris World Championships that were first held in 2010, they actually have to play with the cathode ray tube TV using the original controllers and using the original consoles. So it's very, very traditional in that sense. So you can watch them play on Twitch, YouTube, any other places on the internet. And so you can see people actually breaking records, just see how they play. You can learn different techniques of how to do the different games. And it's created a large online presence and a social scene that's kind of like the arcades in the past. You used to go to the arcade, you would play against other people, you would see who has the high score. And now we've just basically moved it into the virtual realm, and everybody is still doing it there. So the real question is, where's gaming going next? I don't know, right? That's going to be up to y'all to design the next games and figure out how we're going to do it. Yeah. On where, yeah. So, I mean, gaming's gone through a lot of ups and downs. You know, looking at the 1983 crash being one of them. So I hope that it's going to keep going. And I am going to go ahead and go through really quick past these, because then we need to see how everybody did. Okay. So let's see here. Artsy Eel, who is that? Smart Lion, who is that? Me. All right, and our number one? Eager Badger. Woohoo! All right, so if you three would like to come up here. Okay, so who is my number one? Your number one? You can pick which one you want. You want that one? You're two? Yeah. And there you go. Okay, so that's the end of our game. I hope you learned some things. I know a lot of this you already knew. So now, after this, you can go over there and you can do our activity that we'll be using all the stuff that I've talked about. So I hope you remember everything that I talked about. Is that it?